Amit Paranjape's official LinkedIn profile reads as co-founder RallyScore and chair MCCI IT committee. But anyone who follows Amit on social media knows that he is so much more than what the LinkedIn headline conveys. Amit has close to 70,000 followers on Twitter, and that's because of the prolific nature of Amit's interests. His insightful help all his followers learn and engage with a variety of topics. So we wanted to pick Amit's brains about how his curiosity has fueled his public persona. Amit is also prolific when it comes to networking. So we asked him for tips on improving networking skills. Spoiler alert, don't do networking for the sake of it. Do it because you're genuinely interested in the person. We also spoke about the different manifestations of his curiosity, from reading books to taking courses to writing articles. So, if you're thinking about how curiosity and networking can help you and your team stay future relevant, you will find this useful. If you're just plain curious about how Amit manages to do what he does, you'll find this super useful. And by the way, remember to subscribe to our show on whatever platform you're getting this on. That way, you'll get notified when we publish a new episode. And we do have many interesting guests lined up for you. Amit, welcome to the CTQ Smartcast.
Hi, good to be here, PV.
The one thing that we wanted to talk to you about was the role of curiosity and networking in future relevance. And when we look at you, look at public profile, we can see curiosity at work right from the kind of things that you follow, the kind of people that you are with, and we can see that in action in the kind of content that you have created. So the first question that comes to mind when anyone talks about Amit Paranjape is the whole prolific nature of the number of topics that you follow. You're curious about everything from electric vehicles to Pune rains, from history to startups, technology to cricket, and also some weird hand egg kind of sport that you follow. So, do you just follow anything that interests you, or is there a deliberate plan about it?
First of all, thanks for that introduction. I'm not sure if it's curiosity. I guess you can call it curiosity, but there's definitely no systematic plan around this. It's by definition, curiosity is something that's a little difficult to force fit onto something or onto someone. You have to be inherently curious about something. You can do a lot of things to further extend it and work on it, but fundamentally, you need to be curious about things. And I think most people are. If you go all the way back to human civilization, or even before humans. I think it's curiosity that has basically led evolution in so many ways. Again, if you come back to modern times and look at children, for example, they're really curious. I think it was Carl Sagan who probably said that kids are amazingly curious in their kindergarten or in their first grade, and they ask all kinds of questions. And something happens between that and the 12th standard. By the time they're in the 12th standard, they have just completely lost it. So that's something to do with our education system. So again, coming back to your question, curiosity is something which is very inherent with most people. Obviously, areas of interest can be different, topics can be different. And as far as I'm concerned, yes, I am, as you said, I'm curious about too many things. I'll give you that. And I think it's not really science versus history versus politics versus current affairs. I think it's everything around us, it's everything around me. So anything that I see, I guess a question that comes to mind is why, how, what, the five W's, right? And the H, right? And if you have that outlook, then really you're not limited to any topic. So if you see a physical phenomenon or a chemical phenomenon or a biological phenomenon, you immediately get into the science mode and start asking questions about what it is, how did it happen, why did it work. But you can extend the same thing to current affairs event. Right? You see an event and okay, why did it happen? Why is this a position of person X or country X? And then you go back into history and say what were the issues and how did this come about. You can take this sort of view into practically any field, any domain. So it's not a science centric thing. You can do this in humanities, you can do this in liberal arts, you can pretty much do it in anything. So I think that's probably the only thing that I would say triggers me, that whenever I see something in any domain, I subconsciously start asking questions to myself. And that's something that I guess I can't control. Sometimes it does get bothersome. These days, thankfully, you have a smartphone in your hand. Till about 10 years back, I had to wait till I got to my laptop to then start searching and doing queries and looking for books and looking for blogs to get some quick answers. And if I don't have that answer, it bothers me. I think that's one way to test if you have curiosity. If the follow-up question starts bothering to the point where you then actively seek out ways to answer that question for yourself. And as I said, it could be a combination of Google search, looking at a book, checking out a library, asking an expert in that field, whatever.
Amit, you spoke about how things are easier in terms of the thirst of knowledge. If you just compare how things were when you were growing up, when you had to still go to a library, to the times when you were with a laptop, to now with a smartphone in your hand, how has it affected that part of your life where you are trying to find these answers?
I think that's a good question. If I were to go back to my school days, that time obviously there was no internet, there was no computer. And when I was in school, libraries were also not that easily accessible. Our school didn't have a great library, and public libraries, you didn't have encyclopedias out there. But I was fortunate. My parents, my grandparents, my uncle, aunts, many of them themselves were quite curious and probably saw that even I was curious about a bunch of different things. I remember practically even before fifth standard, I used to get regular gifts of various encyclopedia type books. I mean, there were those Tell Me Why series, there were various kinds of encyclopedias across various fields. And that, so I essentially had a small home library, if you will, across a variety of different topics, mostly on science around that time. Then in the school days, I used to also subscribe to a bunch of magazines. You probably may not remember, but there was a good magazine called Science Today in the 80s in India. I used to get a couple of science magazines from the US as well. At that time, my aunt used to be in the US, and she had sent me subscriptions of a couple of magazines like Popular Mechanics, Popular Science, Scientific American as well. And then my grandfather was a big fan of National Geographic, so we used to get that. All this was quite useful to build up that knowledge. And of course, I used to ask questions all the time. And as I said, I had my family who was interested in many of these topics. I got some of those interests from them. So I used to ask questions to not just parents, but uncle, aunts, grandfather, and get some of those answers. Then if I fast forward to college or junior college, as we call it, 11th, 12th standard, I got access to probably what at that time was one of the best sources of knowledge in Pune, and which was the British Library. Again, this is pre-internet. So if you are crazily curious and the first time you saw a British Library reference section or even the regular library, it was literally like a kid in a candy store. I mean, it was just fabulous experience to see so many different books across so many different topics and nicely organized in an air-conditioned environment. In the reference section, you could sit for hours. And so after 11th standard, that became a huge part of seeking out information. It was like the internet. You had access to all kinds of encyclopedias. You had access to daily papers coming in from the UK 2 days late. So that was quite something. And even when I went to IIT, I continued that because I used to come to Pune often. And more than the IIT library, the British library was better in terms of the general knowledge aspects of it. That continued. And that really were my main sources before the advent of the internet in the late 90s.
I remember, I think late 90s for me, when British Library was the place. This was still pre-Google days. Whenever we used to set quizzes, I used to spend a day in the reference section at British Library before setting up a quiz. And talking of quizzing, we can't let you go without asking you some quiz questions. And given the whole nature of your varied interests, I think we can do the entire chat by just asking you quiz questions, but I'm going to restrict myself to 2 or 3 questions. And this one is very simple for you. I'm sure this is right down your alley. You'll probably answer it before I complete the question, right? So the Maharashtrian cultural scene is known for 2 historic pat in the back. The first one is when Bal Gangadhar Tilak gave a pat to this young singer and named him Bal Gandhar. In the 1930s, a young boy played Bal Gandhar's song on harmonium, and this boy received a pat from Bal Gandhar. So, who was this young boy?
I don't remember the name. I remember the. No, I can't remember the name. Sorry.
So, this is probably the most versatile person that we
Was
know
it
of.
Puller?
It is Pune
Yeah, I
Deshpande.
thought it was Puller, but I thought 30s was a little too young for
Right.
him. That's why I
Yeah,
wasn't
he
so
was a
sure.
young boy then.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So this was Pune Deshpande who got
Mhm.
a pat from Bal Gandharva,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then the rest is
Right,
history, as we
right.
say. On that note, Amit, we'll continue on this. This was just to highlight your interest in Pune and Pune's history, and not just Pune's history, right? History of
Mm-hmm.
India and culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of people probably associate you with interest in culture as well because you have so many different interests.
Mm-hmm.
So one question that comes to mind, Amit, is corporate professionals, leaders don't seem to be indulging in interests that are like not directly related to their work area or to their professional growth. So, what do you say to this?
See, I think that is a good question. I think that's going to be important for your audience. So, I think curiosity is something that's, in some sense, a way of life, right? Or in some sense, how you think about anything. And I think it's extremely important for work. Now, I have some spare time for some of my work. I can indulge into a lot of other things. But even when I was very busy with my work, you need the same curiosity in your work. Because, see, the thing is, if you're not curious, you will just do the task at hand, right? Whatever your task may be. But if you are curious, you will expand your scope in multiple directions. And I'm not just talking about doing more work, but learning new things related to your work, understanding a broader perspective of what you're doing, why you're doing it, who your customer is, who your supplier is. See, many times, and especially this is applicable for professionals who work in big companies, they work in silos and they oftentimes completely lose track of who their customer is. And ultimately, in startups, it's easy because many times you don't have layers and you directly see the customer firsthand or at least secondhand. But in large companies, there are so many layers between you and the end customer that you have no idea of what's really going on. So that's where curiosity is very important. And curiosity can play two important roles there. One is the real curious ones will peel through the layers or jump through the layers and really get access to the final customer, indirectly or direct. And it doesn't have to be direct, but there are videos out there are blogs out there, and you can still get the first-hand feedback from the customer. It could be sitting in your own internal company's library, right, which a normal developer may not have seen. Secondly, if you don't have access to your end customer, you look at the supply chain inside the company, and maybe a salesperson is your customer. So treat that as your internal customer and go forward with that. So that curiosity of figuring out something beyond your immediate scope of work, whether it's knowledge about the work, whether it's the strategic direction of your work or your domain, which is, I'm working in this field, but where is this going in 5 years, in 10 years? Is it changing? Is it disrupting? What skills do I need to pick up going along? Another thing that I talk about is understanding the market and the competitors. You could be a techie person, but you still need to be very curious about understanding what the landscape is out there. So that level of curiosity in any professional's work, and I gave you software examples, but this should be true in any domain. That curiosity is extremely important. And what I have seen work for big companies and small companies and startups, especially people working in big companies in any field, keep that curiosity factor going there. And I think professionally, it's extremely important for people to succeed. If they want to succeed, they need to realize this.
Amit, can you expand a bit more on why people should do this? The reason why I ask this is people seem to be feeling that I haven't been doing this for the last 5, 10 years. Nothing has impacted me. People have, it's like the Hindu rate of growth, right? They have been growing in their careers to a certain level. So they assume that, yeah, without actually having this kind of curiosity, I'm still going to get somewhere. But you're going to hit that ceiling pretty soon.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that you probably have already interviewed him. Anand Deshpande, the founder of Persistent, the chairman of Persistent, has made this point multiple times on various public forums that this mid-level career progression is the most critical one. And if you don't skill yourself up the right way, where you are either not doing the core development or doing the core sale, and again, this could be used even outside of the software industry, then you're in trouble. Then you're just a middle manager doing paper pushing, right? So I think from a survivability in the career standpoint also, I think this is extremely important because disruptions happen. And we have seen disruptions happen in various industries multiple times. IT industry right now is looking good, but we don't know when the next disruption will come. And we have seen these disruptions in many industries over the last so many decades. Whether it's reskilling, whether it's understanding the overall market, whether it's understanding what the end customer issues are, continues to be very important. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but this also gets into the discussion of an MBA versus an engineer, right? And this is a big topic, and I'm not going to take sides. But if I were to talk about it from a point of view of an engineer, they sometimes just assume that there are some things that are responsibility of MBAs and managers, and techies don't want to get into that. Correct. And consequently, there are some managers who feel that they don't want to get into details because they are just high-level people. And I think both are wrong, right? So this barrier needs to be broken, right? And so for someone who's an engineer and a techie, I would suggest that look at a good MBA from a top college and see how they have pursued their career or how they work. They get that natural perspective of breadth. Partially, it's their education and their case study method in any good MBA college, whereas a good engineering college programs you in a different direction, which is going deep, especially if you have done masters and PhD. Both sides need to understand the other a little bit. The breadth versus depth balance is also important.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So that brings me to the next question. Given the different areas that people will be interested in, and in your specific example, do you actively seek lessons or try to connect dots from different worlds? For example, say how Tom Brady is staying relevant at his age, how companies should reinvent themselves. Last year, we had a lot of people talking about getting lessons from, say, Napoleon's Waterloo defeat and how that can be applied to how companies should respond to COVID-19. So, do you do that? And are you probably stretching it too much by artificially trying to look for these?
I don't think people need to. And I think there are some people who do it because they want to put some good lines in presentations or in good talks.
Right.
And I'm not saying they're bad. Sometimes it's good to come up with a good analogy saying that XYZ in this historical perspective did this thing wrong. That's why they lost, or they won because they did these things right. But I think no point in overdoing it. If there is an analogy, it will come up, but don't go overboard in terms of trying to find parallels, especially in outside fields. I think there are management consultants and management trainers who routinely do talks like what you can learn from other fields. And I'm not saying they're bad. They give you some interesting anecdotes and some ideas, but ultimately look at those after you have exhausted your own field. First, understand your field, your domain, analogies inside of your domain, rather than understanding something from a completely different domain, whether it's warfare, whether it's sports. I would say understand how your competitor dealt with this problem.
Right.
Or how maybe you're a mid-sized company. So look at how a large company or a leader in your marketplace dealt with this company. There may be easier answers there. So go there instead of going into complete blue sky thinking. It may not be that much value addition.
In fact, we had an interesting conversation with Monish, Nitin, and Prashant last year. And one of the parallels that we were trying to draw was from the world of open source software development. We don't have to go anywhere very too far, too distant to bring these lessons into how to deal with this whole remote working mode. And I thought that was right there.
Right,
people know it very well. People have been part of that open source movement. So much easier to draw those lessons more readily. One more quiz question, Amit, before we.
I think I'm going to miss this one as well.
Oh, no, you got the first one. You're going to get this one as well. So, this one is again related to many of your interests. The first modern treatise on the Indian monsoon was written by an English astronomer in the 17th century. This person is very well known in the field of astronomy, and almost everyone knows this person has used some term related to him in other fields, not related to astronomy also. He also funded the printing of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica. So who is this person who was the first person to write the modern treatise on Indian monsoon?
Again, I forgot. I know the person quite well, but don't recollect the name. I remember reading about him for sure.
So this is Edmund Halley of the Halley's Comet. So he was the first. He was the first person to write this. Right. Yeah. So we all know about the comet.
Yeah.
And for us, you are the weatherman of Pune, right? So like somebody tweeted just today that the weather actually listens to Amit rather than the other way around. So how do you find time to just track all these things?
Again, weather is another area of interest for me. I've been tracking it all along for many years. It may sound very boring, but one of the interesting channels that I used to watch in the US when I moved there in the early 90s, and again, this is pre-internet days. You couldn't surf around, so TV was a much bigger part of what you could spend time on. Weather channel was a very interesting channel at that time, and the only weather you could see in India at that time was once a day InSat photo at that time, if you remember the early 90s. And here suddenly they, even at that time, they were talking about Doppler radars, they were talking about satellite maps, they were talking about local fluctuations, changes, a lot more parameters. So I've been fascinated with that. Now a lot of that thing is available here, both through IMD as well as through private players. Again, this is one of those things I don't spend extra time on, but it's something that I track on the side. One of the things that you've asked this question a couple of times, right, which is how do you do all of these different things in terms of keeping track of so many things? And I think it's a personality-based issue. There are some people who like to go very deep in a particular area, and you have talked to quite a few people who fit that. We know many of those. And then there are some people who like to go for breadth, right? And if you're interested in multiple things, obviously I'm not interested in getting a PhD or even writing a paper in any of these. I'm doing it primarily for my curiosity. I'm not doing it to meet a specific deadline or a specific objective or something like that. So then obviously you can get into multiple things and you can multitask, right? So multitasking is something that is discussed in many contexts in the corporate world as well. Something it's a very good idea, something it's a very bad idea. And I think it's just an idea and it's just a tool, right? And not everyone can do it very well. Some people can do it very well for some tasks and then it's very effective for them. So there is no one size fit all answer there as well. But I like to do it and I like to keep multiple threads going in my head. And you could do the same thing physically in terms of multiple browsers open, multiple Twitter windows open, multiple blogs open at the same time. And there are some people who do it that way. There are some people who would rather just get one article and then spend next 5 hours on that. I do the same thing with books. Many times I read 2 or 3 books at the same time because I'm not stuck with one. I'll read one, then I'll read another one. And that's okay. Again, I'm saying it's not right or wrong. It's just some people do it that way. But I think that helps me to keep track of so many different interests. So it's a chicken and egg because I do it that way. I have many interests, but because I have many interests, I do it this way. It could be either way.
So, Amit, we're going to come to the specific hacks and systems. Like you said, it is each for your own. It's good. It's working for you. But what we've also seen is some of these conversations just become a trigger for people to try out different ideas if they're not aware of them. So, we're going to go deeper into that. But before that, I wanted to ask you one question about the manifestation of the curiosity. A lot of people follow a lot of topics, which is they're following news items and they're just seeing what is happening there on Twitter or read some article. You seem to be taking your manifestation to the next level where you are attending some of these courses. Even reading books for that matter is one level higher than following the news items. You did that course from Bhandarkar Institute. Your involvement with MCCI as well, that's taking it to the next level. So can you talk about that? Is that just a natural progression of your interest in those topics?
Yes, absolutely. I think, natural progression of interest has to go to the next level. It has to get into something more detailed, right? Again, I said, I don't want to do a PhD in that topic, but I want to at least learn a little bit more. So the next step probably after reading something is if you have good online courses available in your area, and as last 1.5 years because of all the lockdowns, in a sense, some good things have happened in this area because Bhandarkar Institute probably would have never come up with online courses. They used to do a few offline, but now suddenly they pivoted extremely well and they have done 8 or nearly 10 courses in the last 18 months. I've probably done about 5-6 of those. So I think online learning is here to stay. It's extremely important. It's amazingly flexible. And I think that's a very good next step if you want to get into the next level of involvement in your area of interest. MCCI is something similar, right? Again, it's and I know you're going to talk about that. It's related to networking and it's also doing something more than just consuming information, which is actually whether it's creating communities, helping communities in your field of interest, and whether it's advocating specific issues, whether it's lobbying with the policymakers, whether it's just education. So all those things, you take it to the next level in terms of when you associate yourself with all these kind of organizations, and there are many in every field. And again, especially Pune is full of these types. So yes, I think it's a next step.
And even the content that you create, like you said, consumption is one thing, but when you create, it's I think how Feynman said that when you actually teach something to someone, that's when you actually learn it better, right?
Right. See, I think one of the things that I personally is, and again, I'm not saying this is right or this is wrong, but if I find something interesting, I have this inherent desire to share it with friends and now with everyone. So if I find something interesting, a piece of information in any field of my interest, my first reaction is to share it. And so then social media is a great platform for that because I know if I found it interesting, there'll be at least 10 other people, there'll be 100 other people, depending on the topic. If it's cricket, there could be 1,000 other people who will find it interesting and who would learn something from it. And I'm trying to do the same thing from other people who are sharing.
Correct.
So in a sense, you can call it being altruistic, but I won't even call it being altruistic or paid forward. It's just a natural tendency for people to share interesting stuff that they find interesting. And the reverse also happens. So that becomes a natural progression as well. for many. And again, that's where social media, blogging have been very powerful tools.
I remember some of the blog posts that you had written pre 2009 10, I think, when you used to actually distribute them through mail, right?
Yeah, of course.
With
Because see, I
social
think
media,
that
it
time
is
email was probably the only distribution platform
correct.
out there to distribute your blogs. And this was, as you said, before social media got
Took
popular.
off.
Now, obviously, one of the biggest use cases of social media is sharing your content, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram.
So we're going to ask you more about networking, but before that, I'm going to ask you one more quiz question, Amit. And
Okay, and let me fail 3 out of 3 then.
let's see. So, where would you have seen a part of a cross section of an induction motor? This is the moment when electricity is transformed into forward motion. So, that specific part of a cross section of an induction motor.
Okay, now you're really testing. I'm not even an electrical engineer.
But you know this very well.
So where, as in, are you talking about what machine or where?
So this is part of a cross section. They've just taken one cross section, one part of the cross section, and they have used it in the logo of something. I'm going to give you a big hint.
Logo?
Yeah.
Is it Tesla?
It is the Tesla logo.
Yeah. I didn't understand the question. I said, where do you find it? I thought you meant there was some other device or some other. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so this was the Tesla coil.
Right,
They cut that, and
Right,
yeah.
right.
So I wanted to talk to you about the whole role of social media and your friendship with Elon Musk on Twitter. So tell us more about
I
it.
wish, but no, he just responded to one of my many tags that I may have done to his posts or things like that. But yeah, he's been a very fascinating character for many people, especially in the technology field. Right? Leave some of his antics aside, but what is he been able to achieve in multiple areas? It's just amazing, and the focus that he has had. And there are a lot of visionaries out there, but there are few people who actually deliver things. The amount of stuff that he's been to deliver on not one but two, and maybe soon 3 different areas is just mind-boggling, and that's why I find what he does and following him to be very interesting. He can be entertaining as well, but he's solving some real interesting and tough problems and building yet another website or a web-based business channel. I'm not saying those are not good, but far too long people were focusing on just that over the last 2 decades with the advent of the computer and the internet revolution, and not many were focusing on real tough problems. Real physical tough problems.
Correct.
In transportation, in space travel, in energy. And he was one of the few guys to talk about those things. And now many others are also talking about it. So I think that's good. By the way, I'll recommend the biography that Ashley Vance wrote in 2015. I think it's a very interesting book. Gives a good insight. But it's been 6 years. He should really write a follow-up second edition to that, because a lot more things have happened in the last 6 years. Right?
But that is also quite revealing about Musk, and also the fact that it is semi-authorized, right? Elon Musk has had some issues with what Ashley Vance wrote. So that's also interesting. Yeah. So how do you use social media for networking? A basic question that a lot of people will have, almost like a reservation, right? That, okay, I have something to say which may be of interest to somebody like Elon Musk, but I'll probably not tag him. People will feel shy.
Leave aside Elon Musk. That's an extreme corner case. But to answer your more fundamental question, how do you use social media for networking? I'll come one step further down, which is how do you network, or why do you network? Leave social media out initially, and let's talk about the more fundamental question. Obviously, there are a lot of advantages of networking, so let's not get there. I think let's treat that as something that people would remember or know. But then, how do you network? I think it goes back to our discussion from half an hour back, and I think a lot of it is to do with curiosity. I think there are a lot of people who are inherently not curious but want to do networking for the sake of networking because someone has told them it will help them in their career, or it will help them in their job or whatever. And they try to network. And that will never work, because networking is when you're trying to find and talk to interesting people in your field or your fields of interest. If fundamentally you don't have interest in that field or curiosity in that field, then you're not going to have interest in those people. And then you're, in a sense, you're setting up yourself for failure even before you have started networking. So networking has to start with your curiosity in a specific area. And then you automatically find people in that area. So it should not be you just find interesting people. You have to also think of, okay, what are the areas that interest me? Yes, sometimes there are interesting people who may generate your interest in a particular area. That's okay and that's fine. But initially, you have to have that curiosity in a particular area, and then you seek out people who are experts, who are role models, who have done some interesting things. And ultimately, you want to network with people who have done some interesting things. You don't want to network just with people like you. You do, but the goal of networking is to always aim a little higher, right?
Right.
So if that's the case, then you have to first find out what is that area of interest, and then whether it's in the physical world, it's at conferences or in meetups in large corporations, you have better chances, or in sales cycles, or anywhere you seek out those people and try to connect with them, right? In social media, obviously, it's become a lot easier because now you can essentially connect with people anywhere in the world. And that's the second part of the question, which is how do you do networking on social media? So let me come back to that a little later. But I think I'll answer your first question that your networking starts with curiosity in a specific field.
Right.
And then it's just an extension of curiosity in a specific field. And you don't do it for the sake of networking. It's like someone told you that to progress in your career or to do this, you have to just go and meet 10 people. That doesn't work. It works to the extent that yes, there is some serendipity involved in networking. At conferences or on social media, you talk to 100 people and you find 10 interesting who may be out of your field. So yes, that is needed to be done in any sales cycle or anything like that. So that is fine. But ultimately, you need to also be very clear about what areas are going to be of interest to you to take that networking further. Otherwise, you'll meet interesting people, but then you won't have anything to talk to them. And then
Right.
after a hi, hello, it will be the end of that meeting. So let's come back to the social media question a little later.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that we've heard from people who are a bit diffident about networking is that I have some interest, but what do I give to people?
And you don't have to give anything to people. Many times, people who are good in a specific field are usually curious about that field, and they are not always looking for answers. I think they're often looking for interesting questions. So if
Right.
you have interesting questions for them about that field, about that domain, about what they have done, about why they did something, or what would they advise on a specific area, again, this is related to their field of interest or work. That's a good enough start. Many times these people are not expecting you to contribute something to their, at least not immediately. So start with interesting questions for them rather than telling them who you are, what you do, or you have some solution for them, and then they'll laugh at you and say, come on, I'm an expert in this field. Who are you to tell? But you start with asking them interesting questions. There are exceptions, but generally people like to teach or explain in most cases. So if you start off on that platform, I think it's a good starting point.
Do you see a difference in the kind of networking that people should do based on where they are in their careers, tech engineers versus business leaders? Also
I think
time in the
I wouldn't make hard and fast. As I said, you don't do networking for the sake of networking and what is of interest to you, right?
right.
Now, obviously, you need to first tune your interest to be the right interest if you have some flexibility there. So which goes back to our earlier discussion. You have to be curious about your industry, your competitors, your customers, what technology trends are happening in your. So all that is there. And once you have that, you'll automatically find the right people to network in your industry once you have those things clear.
Right.
And I would say don't segment it or don't put it in different buckets. But I'm only going to network with young people, only with old people, only with experts. Keep it open, have an open mind. And any place you go to, you never know who you would connect with, right?
So, how do you stay in touch with them? And when you are engaging with these people, what's like a regular interaction?
Again, there is no real cookie cutter solution there. But if you have connected in the physical world, then it's just a basic question of sending follow-up emails or follow-up LinkedIn message saying, I met you at such and such and we had a good discussion. But I learned this. But by the way, I have one or two follow-up questions on that. Can you, and sort of leave it at that. Or if you have really learned something, then a simple thank you note, connect on LinkedIn. So such basic things. And you can repeat the same thing on social media, whether it's replying with a tweet or something like that. And so again, there's no cookie cutter solution or no sort of standard thing. It's staying in touch. I think most people forget the most basic things of staying in touch, which is you go to a conference and you meet interesting people. Some of them could just be peers. They don't have to be experts or something, but they're good at networking, right? Just sending a one-line email after the conference, or you attended an interesting talk by a speaker. Just sending a one-line thank you email.
Right.
And this has nothing to do with social media. This
Correct.
is the option has been available for 25, 30 years. Just sending a one-line email.
Hmm.
Typically, most of these people advertise their email at the end of the talk, or very easy with Google search to. Anyone who says I can't find your email itself, I think is a problem. I think in today's day and age, it's easy to find someone's email or social media handles using Google, right? So just do that. Just stay in touch. I think people just completely forget or get to their day-to-day chores or whatever, right? After you're done with an interaction in a physical conference, invest some time in trying to find out who are the interesting people and then replying to them, keeping track of them, connecting to them on social media. Do those kind of things. Most people, the moment they are done with a conference, forget everything, right? I think that is a problem. I think that you need to invest some effort on it.
And how have you been seeing people do networking in the last 1.5 years in the absence of these physical conferences?
I think that change had already happened, right? I think if you look at over the last 10 years, or actually even earlier, ever since LinkedIn came online, virtual networking or social media enabled networking has becoming more and more prominent. And of course, in the last year and a half, it's becoming even more prominent. So now with social media, whether it's Twitter or whether it's LinkedIn, it has gotten good professional acceptance in many areas. So pretty much the same things that you do on conferences, you can now do online. You can watch a YouTube talk or an interaction of someone instead of attending a physical session at a conference. Follow it up with the same set of responses that you would do in a conference, or on LinkedIn or Twitter, have a similar professional interaction with someone you don't know initially, but just approach them like a cold call, or hi, good to meet you. Looks like you're interested in this. Again, there has to be some match. There has to be some interest match, right? Or some common background. Another thing that I didn't mention is for networking, alumni networks play a big role. That's one of your easiest networking opportunities that people forget. All the things that I was talking about for the last 10 minutes was about networking where you have no common connection, just common interest. But actually, it can be a lot easier if you tap onto your alumni connects, whether it's your undergrad, whether it's grad, whether it's previous companies. You don't realize that you already have a big network out there. Especially, I'm talking about mid-career professionals, even fresh grads. They already have their college networks, right? So tap into that and stay in touch with your classmates, with your ex-colleagues from your previous companies. That is one of the easiest networks to maintain, and people just completely forget it.
Yeah. And one of the final questions, so which is where we're going to get down to some recipes, both for curiosity and networking. How do you make it easy for yourself? What kind of tools and hacks and systems do you use to make it more deliberate? Basically, what are the things that listeners can do to be more
I
like
think
you?
if I were to talk about tools, whether it's email, whether it's Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, each of these platforms has a bunch of different tools. And I don't have to go into details of that. But it's, again, going back to basics, whether it's filtering, whether it's marking as important, whether it's storing drafts, whether it's searches to see if there has been any update by someone. All these provide plenty of tools. So just use those tools, understand the capability of those platforms. Twitter, for example, has so many powerful tools that very few people use, whether it's lists, whether it's search, whether it's filtering, and you can find pretty much anyone that's out there. So I think one of the things that people need to, it's difficult for me to explain in 2 or 3 minutes, but you can pretty much learn about it or read about it. But you need to be very good at search. And when I say search, it really starts with Google search, and then search in any platform, whether it's search on LinkedIn, whether it's search on Twitter, whether it's search on Facebook, whether it's search in your own email. 2 or 3 things. People don't understand the value of search. Then people don't take search seriously. And third and important thing which I just highlighted is people just don't know how to use search. And I think sometimes, once in a while, I think there should be actually classes on how to use Google search or how to use Twitter search and things like that. There's makes things so many easy. And then there are people who always complain, oh, the algorithmic timeline didn't show me this important tweet or this important. There are so many ways to beat an algorithmic timeline and have a search or have a filter or have a list which will show you exactly what you want. And in all platforms, because every platform is now essentially using algorithmic timeline.
Right.
So become search literate is what, as I said, people talk about right? Becoming social media literate. I'll add another term to that, saying you have to become search literate in this world, because the information is there.
Right.
But if you don't know how to find it, then you're as good as illiterate in that particular. Learn that, and that will be very, very helpful.
A subtext to that, Amit, to improve the quality of your search, do you also do a lot of note taking? Is there any metadata that store for people, articles?
Not really. I think again, I use tools. I think one of the best metadata for a person,
Hmm.
I think that I've found in the last 15 years is LinkedIn.
Right.
95% of people with any connection to the corporate world, and now increasingly even not connected to corporate world like
Correct.
politics and NGOs, have a
Stores.
basic profile on LinkedIn.
Right.
Right now, that is better metadata than any place you will find. So that is as good as basic metadata. Now, if you're trying to find someone's Twitter handle or finding more information on Twitter about someone, you need to realize that finding for someone's Twitter handle on Twitter is not very effective.
Correct.
If I have to find Harish Kumar Twitter handle,
Struggle.
if I put Harish Kumar in Twitter search, I would easily find it. The most powerful search to find a Twitter handle is Google.
Right.
So if I put a name, Twitter ID, and put it in Google, Google usually does a very good job of giving me that person's Twitter handle. Even better than LinkedIn at times.
Right.
So Google search is far better than so you can actually use someone's name LinkedIn, someone's name Twitter, and use Google, and you'll get better results. So when you have such good search available out everywhere, same thing with email. I think this whole business of metadata and categorization and folders and subfolders and all that, I'm not saying it's bad, but I think that was a traditional approach when you didn't have powerful search. So then you had to have a very segmented approach to track information, the old library catalog system, right? Today, everything can be completely flat. You just need to remember the keywords. And again, it goes back to you need to know what to search. So for that, you need to know the right keywords. Once you remember that, then I don't store any of this information anywhere, take notes or write it down or anywhere. I just remember the keywords. I think that is all that you really need.
And one more question that came to mind, Amit, is how do you handle new media, right? So now you have Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. So audio has become a big thing. We moved from text to video first, and now video is becoming less important, and audio is becoming more important. So do you get onto every new platform that is out there and test it out, or how do you handle that?
No, I don't. I haven't been very active on Clubhouse. I haven't been very active on Twitter Spaces as well. I prefer the asynchronous method of communication more than the synchronous method. So in that sense, text and tweets for me is better than a live conversation on Spaces or Clubhouse. But obviously, it's an individual choice, right? Some people find it more interesting, some people don't. But to answer your question, yes, I don't chase every new platform that's out there. For me, I would say email, LinkedIn, and Twitter are probably my three most used platforms.
Right.
And I think those are quite effective and probably will remain that way for at least a few years. Of course, you can't say a new platform may come next year, will make all these obsolete, and then that's fine. I mean, you need to get on it.
Right.
But for now, I think these three are quite good across all the use cases that you could think of.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm sure this should be true for at least 95 to 99% of our audience as well.
Yeah. But of course, if you want to do an interview and all and broadcast it, I've done a lot of these kind of interviews like what we are doing with MCCI and with some other blogs. Then obviously you use Zoom or WebEx and record it and then post it on YouTube. So that publishing is a different problem altogether, and for which you use a blog or a text blog or a video blog, which is often that is still necessary for these kind of interviews.
Correct. Yeah. So we'll come to the last section where we're going to ask you about the future relevance of 2 to 3 things. And it's like your hot take on what do you think is the future relevance of this. So the first one, we just spoke about it. So what do you think is the future relevance of email?
People have been talking about the death of email. Every few years they talk about it without realizing that email has been around for now 40 plus years or more. And I continue to be a big fan of email. I think for formal inter-company communication, I think it's still the best standard. Of course, technologically, there are experts who will talk about it not being secure. It needs to improve in this area and that area. And yes, I think a lot of those things can happen and should happen. But I think fundamentally, I think email will continue to be a good basic platform to interact between different organizations. Inside an organization, yes, chat programs like WhatsApp and all other kinds will be more popular and will reduce the role of email. But when you're trying to interact with people you don't know, email would still be a good. It's like your visiting card. People have been saying for last 20 years that your business card is going to extinct, and it hasn't. So a business card which has your phone number and email on it will still continue to be, at least in the foreseeable future, an important way of communicating.
Yeah. All right. The next one, I think we can have a separate 1 hour long conversation, but still, I'm going to ask you for a hot take. So, what is the future relevance of Pune as a startup destination?
I think it is very much relevant. It's done well. It could obviously do a lot better. And we all know the constraints that are there that are preventing it from doing even better. But I continue to be very optimistic and positive about it. We have enough positive things going in our favor, and we are in the top five. You can always say we could do this better, we can do this better, and we are falling behind Bangalore on this or NCR on this, and that's fair. But that should take away the fact that we are still in the top five. So I continue to be optimistic, and if there are some things that we all know that hurt us, if we are able to fix some of those things, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's some other areas, we can do even better.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, Amit, what is the future relevance of T20s?
I think very relevant. I'm a big fan of all formats of cricket. So I even like ODIs. But I think T20s will get more popular and ODIs will definitely go down in popularity. I think Test cricket will continue to do well and
Right.
T20 will do well. So then ODI is neither here nor there. So I think we'll see that.
Did you watch the 100?
Which one?
The 100.
No, I haven't seen that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
They've started having 5 ball overs and a lot of
Oh,
changes.
okay. I thought you were talking about a documentary.
No.
Yeah, but that I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
a few on one of those sports channels.
Right.
But ODIs can be interesting. Yeah, the one that we had 2 days back was really
Yeah.
great. Right.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it
Yeah.
just highlights the fact that ODIs can also be very interesting.
Yeah. On that note, Amit, thanks a lot. We touched upon a whole range of topics, trying to do justice to your varied interests as well. And I think we've got a lot of useful, actionable lessons on the role of curiosity and networking, and how our listeners can actually use these lessons in their own work for professional growth or otherwise. I'm stressing on that fact because it's not to be done for a very specific objective,
Right.
but do it for the right reasons. So thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Amit.
Thanks. I think this was interesting. Had fun doing this interaction. And I hope I've probably rambled across a variety of different topics. Hope some of them will be of interest to some of your audience. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amit.